Oh, how is everyone doing tonight? I am so excited about tonight's show. Episode 6, about to put it in the can. I tell you what, it really is going to be a great show. You're going to want to stick around for all of it. Tonight's Cocktails with Cav. I have my festive Christmas glass with some eggnog with a little something extra, obviously. But look, please, if you want to support the show, we'll have this up all show. Obviously, the QR code will take you straight to us. Buy us a cheap cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com. We'd love to have your support so we can keep bringing you great authors, entertainers, and artists. And if you want to get crazy, really, check out our merch. That's a great way to support the show and get you some great swag in the process. Heck, we've got all kinds of great stuff. We got I'm waiting on my cocktail glass because that's going to be my official drinking glass for the show. And then of course I'm waiting on my ball cap. I have to protect my grape from the sun, obviously. But please hang with us. Tonight's guest, very special guest, author and fellow veteran Jerry Glazer, and we're going to be here tonight talking about his fantastic book, Vietnam Uncensored: 365 Days in a Nightmare, which is coming out soon, and it's just going to be a fantastic conversation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage my very special guest and fellow veteran, Jerry Glazer. Oh, how you doing, my friend Jerry? Glad you're with me.
Okay, good to see you, George.
Yeah, I'm so glad we could make it back. We had some technical issues.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you could be with us and talk about your great book, Vietnam Uncensored: 365 Days in a Nightmare. And, and I know the book covers from 1967 to 68 in your time of service there, and it was such a tumultuous time in history. But I'm just happy you're here and can share some of the backstory of the book and hopefully give our listeners an opportunity to make sure they can grab it up when it comes out. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how you even got into some of those operations you ended up in Vietnam? I know, being airborne and special ops myself as a veteran, probably some serious backstories you could share with us.
Okay. Well, I wound up by a series of events being drafted, so I never enlisted. And the draft, when I was sent to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, for basic training, and I was really a terrible soldier. I didn't have any muscle structure. I was basically an academic before, and I could not keep up with that basic training. I mean, I was so weak. I was the last guy running. If you would run somewhere, I was the last guy running. Everyone, the drill sergeants were always yelling at me. I mean, it was a joke what the drill sergeant would say, Glazer, you better pick up the rear. If you don't move your ass, we're both going to be in hospital. I said, both be in hospital, drill sergeant? He said, yeah, they're going to have to operate to get my foot out of your ass. And that's how bad it was. And everything I did was terrible. Anyways, every day, basic training, you're out on the calisthenic field and you're jumping around with your clothes on, with your clothes off, carrying rocks, carrying duffel bags, you name it, we carried it. And it was then snowing, and it was cold. And I was rolling around on doing push-ups and sit-ups and whatever. And a Jeep pulled up, and we were called to attention. And the lieutenant came up and said, is anybody interested in becoming a warrant officer? Now, I knew that you shouldn't volunteer in the Army. Everybody tells you that. But I could care less. I raised my hand. Anything would be better to get out of that abuse. And I got into a Jeep. I was the only one who raised his hand. They drove me to a Quonset hut about 20 minutes away. I went inside. Guess what I found? I found a pot-bellied stove, burning coal, a warm room, chairs, 2 or 3 other guys hanging out, and donuts on the table with coffee. Whoa. Hey, you got my attention. They were sugar glazed donuts, like like crawlers type of thing. So I got myself a donut. I drank some of the black coffee, and I was on my second donut when a lieutenant walked in. Attention! I actually saluted with the donut in my hand because I didn't want to get rid of it. And they let us in. They let us into a room. Right? I stuffed my mouth full of that donut. Put down the coffee. Went into the room. There was a whole like a 2-minute story, and then they put on a film about how it was to become a warrant officer, and because a warrant officer become a helicopter pilot. That was what it was for. And when it was all over, they put me in a room with this lieutenant, and he wanted to sign me up. But in order to become a warrant officer, you have to sign up for 4 years. The tour of duty went 4. Now drafting was 2 years of service. I wasn't going to go for 4. I didn't want to go to Vietnam, so it was 4 years. I'd have to be insane. So I gave them a story. I can't do it. I got to speak to my father. I got to speak to my mother. I got to speak to God. He let me go, and I went back to my barracks. I was back at my barracks at about 4:45. The unit wasn't back yet. The training unit wasn't back. So the minute I did, I was wiped out. I washed up, lay down in bed. And when they came in around 5:30, 5:45, they woke me up. And I went to dinner. I had enough strength because I slept to do the monkey bars. I got had mess, came back, cleaned up, put myself together for the next morning, went to sleep, got up the next morning, went back to training. About in that same week, another Jeep pulls up and another officer comes out. They call us to attention. And does anybody interested in officer training school? But for officer training school, you have to have a college education. That was me. Hand went up. Now, not many guys in that unit had a college education. You know, I mean, they were all drafted or whatever. So I went. There was about 6 or 7 people in that room. We went to another Quonset hut in another part of the base. Guess what? A potbelly stove, warm area, a table, coffee, and this time sugar-coated donuts. Oh, man, they had my attention. I grabbed a couple donuts, stuffed it in my face as fast as I can, drank some coffee. The lieutenant came out, took us into a room. This time there was no movie, just, be the best of the best, be an officer in the United States Army, come with us. So I'm in a room with this officer. Again, I got to speak to my father, I got to speak to my mother, I got to speak to God. Okay, you go back to your unit. So they let me go. I went back to my unit, but this time I was back at 4:30. Way before they came out. So I went to sleep. I was so asleep that I didn't even hear these people come into the barracks. They had to shake me to wake me up. I was such a deep sleep. So I went into the mess hall, had minute, then went for the next day, whatever. We went to training. About a week later, a truck pulls up. This time it's a truck. It's not a Jeep. And an officer comes out, a sergeant, a drill sergeant comes out. And he's like, a big guy with a big head, and a red face, and he has boots up to his ankle, up to his knees. He has paratrooper boots up to his knees, and he comes out and he starts out. And as long as I live, I'll never forget. My name is Sergeant Greeley. I'm airborne. My wife is airborne. My son is airborne. My daughter is airborne. Everybody I know is airborne. Come with me. Be the best of the best. Join airborne. So I raise my hand, right? So I figure I get into the truck. Now, in the truck, there must have been about already maybe 10 or 12 or 14 guys. I get in the truck, and I'm expecting him to take us to a Quonset hut.
You didn't think your luck would run off with coffee and donuts yet?
No, why? I mean, it was a routine, man. I had it down pat. I went. Now the truck makes stops, and it stopped at my unit. It was closest to the training field. He stops at my unit first. So I get out of the truck. He says to me, go get your stuff, right? And come back, clean out your locker, bring back everything, put it in a duffel, come back here, and we'll check you, we'll sign you out. So I didn't want to say, where's my coffee and donuts? So I said to him, isn't there an orientation, drill sergeant? He says, there's no orientation. We want people for airborne. You raise your hand, you're in.
And that was it.
You got 20 minutes to get back here. So I went and I got all my stuff. Now, I will tell you, that training, I wanted to cut off the hand that raised to put me in that training. I thought my feet were going to fall off. My heart was going to bust. My brain was going to explode. It was I've never been through that. But you know what's interesting? As bad as it was in basic training, the nurturing that these guys gave us, right? I excelled. Uh, if you ask me how I did it, I can only tell you I don't really know. I made it through. There were guys that were 6'2", 190 pounds, built like hell, could do 50 push-ups in a heartbeat. I couldn't do 10 push-ups in a heartbeat. Forget about 50. And those guys failed because what it was about endurance. It wasn't about strength. It was all about here.
Yep, 90% of it always used to say.
Yeah, and it was. And I don't know how I made it through because I loved that training. I loved those drill sergeants. They were really good to me. And if I couldn't make it, if I couldn't do something, they took me out of the barracks. They'd come, right? Like after night, they come and they take me out and they train me more. Or on the weekends, they train me. They take me, the guys out that couldn't do it, they give us additional training, additional exercise. So there was no way, if you didn't pass that, you didn't want to pass. Because there's no way with that kind of incentive, that kind of training, that kind of attention, not to make it. So I made it through. And when I finally got through, when I got through it, now one of the things that hand to hand is a big thing in airborne training, and they would the drill sergeant paired the small guys with the big guys. So I had the crap kicked out of me. I mean, I was black eye, split lip, bloody nose every time, ears like banged to hell. Even though I had a helmet on, it didn't matter. And I get up from the floor and I went to him and like bleeding, and he said, "Come over here." He says, "What?" He said, "I want you to know something. You can't pick your enemy. You can't pick your opponent on the battlefield. You got to win against that guy. You go back and you beat the hell out of him, and you do it until you can." And you know what? At the end of the day, I did. It was all about technique. It was all about technique. Use what you have against the bigger guy. I was smaller. Use that difference in height, that difference in weight. Use it to get him. Roll on the floor, come up and hit him from the back. All this type of things, and how to like if a guy comes up behind you, and then on the field, it didn't matter. On the field, if someone came up behind you, you had a weapon. So it changed once you had a weapon in your hand, everything changed in hand to hand. It wasn't the same, but on hand to hand with pugilistics, it did matter. So I made it through airborne, and as I was going through that program, it came to me that Vietnam was a 1-year tour of duty, right? So I figured to myself, if I can get through, that was 16 weeks. If I get through like 12 months and I only have less than a year in Vietnam, they won't send me.
Right.
So anything that came up, I volunteered. Now I made it through airborne, and I could go to Ranger School, but the point is they didn't want to send me. Even though I qualified, they didn't want to send me because in order to send me, they wanted me to enlist for 4 years. I wasn't going to do it.
The old 4-year term.
Well, yeah, back to but airborne. If you want to be airborne, you have to sign up for it. That's an enlisted man's thing. That's not a drafted man's thing. You don't become airborne by being drafted. You have to get in there. You have to sign up for it. So I didn't want to go, and the punishment was the minute I graduated, they sent me to Vietnam.
And that was it.
Yeah, but the point is that I wasn't with my unit. You're supposed to be going with the 82nd Airborne. I didn't go with them. I didn't go anywhere. Was you part of that? I went as unassigned. So as unassigned, I wound up in Cam Ranh Bay.
So they ship you to Vietnam unassigned to Cam Ranh Bay, which I assume is probably a little unnerving. But I think, if I remember correctly, you have a heck of a story from this period before you end up in your special operations. I believe you have a heck of a story that actually ended up on NPR or National Public Radio.
In Cam Ranh Bay, when I arrived, there are barracks. It was like a holding company. The holding company had about, I would say, 10 or 12 barracks that held double tier barracks, and I was assigned a bed, and every morning I had to go to the sign-in company to see if my name was called for an assignment. If my name wasn't called by 4:00, I was free for the day to have dinner, and that was the end of it, and then go back the next morning after morning chow. So that night, I think the second night, the first night when I was there, I had no more cigarettes. I had nothing left. So I wanted to go to the PX, but it wasn't the PX was only open in the morning for the transient company. So it was already at night. I wanted cigarettes. So I knew there was a PX across beyond the holding company, across an open field. There was a PX. So I snuck around at night. You weren't supposed to go, but I didn't care. I went and I snuck through the gate, and I was walking across this empty field, and I was alone. And as I'm walking across this empty field, I feel someone walking on my right. I hear someone like crunching. I turn around. It's a guy walking beside me, an average-looking guy, a little bit taller than me, on a heavy-set guy, square face with a jungle cap, and he's walking with me. And I said, and I didn't hear him, so I said hi. He says hi, and we're just talking as we go around. The name on his chest said Cummings. You know, he had the name tag said Cummings. So we walk to the PX. I go in. He's waiting outside. So you want anything? He said, nah, I don't want anything. I didn't think anything unnatural about him meeting me or walking with me. It's the Army. You know, who the heck knows? I go in. I buy gum. I buy Clark bars. I buy Baby Ruths. I buy gum. I buy cigarettes. And I have a bag full of stuff, and I walk out. He's leaning against the building, smoking. So I'm walking back, and he's walking beside me, and we're talking. So I open a pack of cigarettes. I offer him one he doesn't want. I'm looking for matches I don't have, and they didn't give me matches there. I don't have my lighter. So I say to him, "You have a light?" He says, "Yeah." He turns around, and there's the moon. You know, it wasn't you could see in the darkness. It wasn't pitch black, but it was black. And he throws the lighter. He says, "Here," and he flips his lighter. I reach for it, and it passes my hand and into the darkness. So I get down on my hands and knees, and I'm searching for the lighter, right? There are a whole bunch of muffled artillery was accompanying us the whole time. There was artillery units firing into the night somewhere far. And all of a sudden, there's like streaks. As we were walking back, there were streaks going overhead. I said to him, "What's that?" He says to me, "Those are rockets. They're walking in the rockets. They don't hit anything. They're out in the rice paddies." He says, "In a few minutes, the helicopters will go out and they'll chase them away." So they were walking in the rockets, and we were walking. Now I was a little bit. I was anxious because I never saw that before. For him, he just took it like as a matter of course. You know, it's like you hear fire somewhere. Everything was new to me. And when I'm bending down to pick up this lighter, he kicked me in the rear end so hard. I went flying forward like Superman. I scraped my fingers, my hands, my chin. I fell. I got up. I wanted to beat the hell out of this guy. What kind of joke was that? You know, really. And I couldn't find him. He wasn't there. There was the smell of like cordite, you know, like gunpowder. There was a smell of this. But I couldn't find him. So I went back to the PX. Maybe he's at the PX. Maybe he went back to PX. No, they don't see him. So I went back to my unit, and I went to sleep. The next morning, the barrack sergeant woke me up, right? And he says, "Hey man, you're late. You got to get out of bed." I couldn't get up. I said, "Hey, can you help me?" He gave me his hand and he pulled me up. When he pulled me up, it was like my whole back was being stabbed with a knife. It was terrible pain. I said, "What the heck?" He said, "What's the matter? Let me see. Take off your shirt." I took off my shirt. My whole back, from my shoulders to my buttocks, was black and blue. There must have been he didn't kick me. There was an explosion. Now, I don't know. I wasn't bleeding. I didn't have shrapnel. I didn't have an injury. I couldn't figure it out. Neither could he. He says, "You want to go to the hospital?" I said, "No, I'm not going to any hospital." So I limped over to the showers. I took a shower, to the latrine. I took a shower, and I'm looking in the mirror, and sure enough, it was this cover. My back was crimson and blue, black and blue, like somebody really hit me hard. Anyways, I got dressed. I took some aspirin, went in to get my name called, but my name wasn't called. That day, they didn't assign me. So I went to the barracks and I started looking for him. And I went to the barracks. That day was the second day. The third day, again, I went to more barracks. My name wasn't called. The fourth day right? My name was called, but I never found him. I went back, I traced my steps, and I found where halfway up, I found a hole, a crater, a big hole in the ground. But there was nothing in it. There was nothing in it. There was not even a belt buckle. So I don't know, did a rocket fall on him? I couldn't, something happened to him. Now,
I get some guardian angel vibes with that one. That's
yeah. Well, what happened was is that incident that was very strange. I was then assigned to my unit that day. I was assigned to my unit. I got over to July, and in July, what happened was is again we were by the airfield. There was Marine attack squadrons were there. Because July was in between, it was right before the DMZ, so that's where most of the aircraft went out. The DMZ, there was July on K. That's where these big airfields were, where the Marine squadrons would protect the Marine divisions. And there was a bunker, and of course, that area was subject to Viet Cong and North Vietnamese attacks because it was a primary position near the DMZ. So there was bunkers. We would, at night, they would come in they would go to as close as they could, firing rockets. Like with the Cummings, overhead rockets overhead. I went in, I was taking a shower when there was a rocket attack, right? So I grabbed my towel, I ran out. Not that they ever hit anything, but they're firing rockets. So I grabbed my towel and I ran into the nearest bunker. And inside there were a bunch of guys playing cards. With a lamp holding down and, with a visor, and they were playing, I don't know, they were just playing cards in the bunkers, So I'm standing there with my towel and like I'm naked. I have nothing. I just have my towel and my soap. So I say to this guy, I say, anybody got a cigarette? He goes, yeah, here. And he hands me a cigarette. And I'm standing there and I go back and says, how about a light? He flips me his lighter. The same, it's almost an identical situation with Cummings. And I'm standing by the exit, right? And the lighter passes over my fingers past the exit into the road with the incline leading down into the bunker. And I look up and there's Cummings. What the? I run out, and not more than I'm 3 feet out of that bunker, a rocket, boom, on the center. The whole thing collapses.
Jeez.
The whole thing collapses. Tell me the odds. Now, you got to think, I'm thinking to myself, I'm having hallucinations. Like how's that possible? Suffice to say, it's in the book, and Cummings appears 3 more times.
And I tell you, the way the book is, when you talk about how it's laid out, I know reading a little about it, I think you interlace it with a certain amount of history as well.
Yeah. What I did was that I started off. I couldn't write this when I was writing that story. I didn't know much about Vietnam. Be honest with you. I served. I got out. I survived it. So what I did was I began researching the history. And I began researching the history of that book. I tell you, I had a nervous breakdown. I did. I really did. I couldn't believe what happened in that war. How that war was so purposeless and how that war was so orchestrated and how and I'll tell you something, I still don't get my head around the more than 58,000 guys who died there. It was murder. It wasn't even, there was no purpose to that war. Nothing was to be won. But so what I decided was I originally put that history into the story, into this, while I was writing the story. And I had an editor tell me, well, Jerry, your book is about your experiences in Vietnam. It's not about the history. Take the history out. So that the history is a separate portion. Somehow put it in italics, put it at the end of a chapter, put it at the beginning of a chapter. Don't make it part of your story. Because your story is what happened to you and according to what you see. It's not about the history of Vietnam. So I took out all that history, and when I wrote a chapter, at the end of the chapter, I put in history A, B, C, D, E, so that in italics. So when you're reading this book, you have chapter 1 is what happened. Behind chapter 1 is the history of Vietnam. Chapter 2 is what happened. Chapter 2 is the history of Vietnam at that moment in time. What was going on behind the scenes? Why those battles were taking place? How those battles were taking place? More of not trying to illuminate the war itself or combat itself, but to illuminate the series of events that led the American public, that led the American government to take such actions, and then how it affected us. So you have all the politicians, what they did, how they did it, what was wrong, that type of thing. So that's the history. Then you have the story. So that's the book goes along chapter by chapter by chapter, what we did until I'm injured and I go home, and the history of the war. And then there's a prologue and an epilogue. The epilogue culminating what happened at the end of that war.
And see, I think that's so important contextually, and that's why I'm so looking forward to getting a hold of your work and reading it, because I think contextually that's so important for readers, especially it's a newer generation, you know, and
yeah. But you know what? I honest, I wrote the book for me. It was sort of like a cathartic thing. It was sort of like healing me, to get it out of my system, you know, like because I suffer from terrible PTSD, and so just to get it out. So I got the story out, but a lot of that story, there were some things that are, what's the word for it? They aren't absolved by time. We did things, I can tell you, we did terrible things. And I didn't want to leave it out, so I left it in. So I had to put, you know, one of these captions in that, you know, that doesn't represent, and I had to change the names, dates, and places, because I could still go to Leavenworth.
Right.
I can tell you, I mean, some of the stuff that happened there was really weird, and it's like Cali and My Lai. Let us just say he what he did at My Lai, right? And he was not known, and he wanted to write about it. How did he write about it without being prosecuted? Even later,
right.
It's a war crime, right? So he could write about it, but he have to say, well, you know, the dates, the names, and the change, and it doesn't represent anybody. And that's how I wrote those stories, so that, and when it's been read, someone said to me, you know, Jerry, that's crazy. I said, yeah, it's crazy. I said, he says to me, is it true? I said, listen to me. Make up any story you want about Vietnam. I don't care. Even you, make up any story, any war story you want. Go ahead. Make it the worst war story you want. And you know what? I'll believe it. I'll believe it.
Right.
Because what I saw there is not possible. What I saw men do, what I saw events take place, I'm telling you, it doesn't even seem possible that a human being can do those things.
It is, and I like I said, contextually, I think your readers of your work are going to just have a heck of a time learning that context, because I think it ties into what we're having today across the globe. For the last 20 or so years, we have an entire generation that's, you know, found themselves in places for causes that, you know, need to be looked at very closely, and I think that old adage of history doomed to repeat itself is important.
Yeah, but what I tried to do is that I didn't want to make the book about warriors and heroes.
Right.
You know, you read combat stories up to the yin yang about the things that happen, and although that took place, that wasn't my objective. My objective was look, we were just average guys doing a job, and we were trained and we were skilled, but we suffered terrible anxiety, terrible fear, all these diseases in the jungles that attacked us, an insect bite that became infected. We were operating with wounds, and so was everyone else. And you see, these movies with Rambo and all these guys. I never met anybody like that. I never met anybody like that. I mean, I met average guys doing extraordinary things. And you know that from your service. You know that there are just certain men that just do certain things or go into combat and they perform certain acts that are just don't make any sense. I mean, why would a stranger put down his life for you? And I saw that. I saw people commit suicide. I mean, the things that I saw, it's not in a movie. The things that I saw was everyday life under that type of pressure and that type of distress and all that stuff, and people and the government ignorant, asking the most from their citizens and giving nothing. And it all came even after we came back. I never Agent Orange. I was exposed to Agent Orange, and I have a disease from it. But that's the issue is that it never occurred to me they sprayed it on us.
Right.
I thought we knew it was being sprayed in the DMZ and in points north to clear the jungle so that there would be less, because the jungle was so thick, it would take an hour to go 100 feet to chop it down. And here we are going through the jungle, and it was not only us. It was so they would spray it. They sprayed the goddamn area, but they'd spray it over where we were sleeping. We didn't know. And after the fact, and it took 25 years for the Army to acknowledge that this was a problem.
Right.
25 years, and 300,000 men were affected by it. They have 300,000 cases on the books. Imagine.
And I tell you, Jerry, I just think, your work, like you said, it partly for yourself to get it out on paper and talk about it.
Exactly.
But I think your work's going to end up possibly helping a lot of people. When's it due out?
Well, the thing is that the publisher has it. It was supposed to be been out already, but they keep sending it back to me without the proper corrections. So I'm hoping that the next one, if the next one comes back in time, we'll put it out for Christmas, if not right after.
Well, Jerry, I think your work's going to be great on a lot of different levels. I mean, not only, like you said, it was cathartic for you to put it down on paper for yourself, but I think it may help some other readers understand things that that may not be familiar with them. Like I said, I think it'll be helpful on a lot of different levels.
And I can tell you, and probably you can too, trauma has a way of remaining with you. And even though not every event was traumatic, like combat, every day was traumatic.
Right,
from the moment I got up. Even when I went to the mess hall, I remember the time I spent there, from the day I got there, from the day I left. I remember everything. I can't remember what color socks I have on in the morning. I can't remember to put away a dish or a spoon. But man, I can remember everything that happened to me. The smell, the taste, the spoons. We went out in the field, the helicopter, the pilot. So many stories, so many men, so many lives that passed before me. Thousands of guys, all of them on a mission to survive, and all of them dying. And nothing was worse than me going to the Memorial War in Washington and looking up in that wall and recognizing the names. George, it destroyed me. It destroyed me. Not that I didn't know before I went. I figured, okay, I'll see. Let me see. Man, the size of that space to put 58,000 names. Gee whiz! It's a football field. I can't get over it. I went back to the hotel. I lay there all day. I couldn't get up. It destroyed me. It just totally destroyed me. The concept of all those boys. And now today, I post every day on Twitter, on X, right? And there's a fellow who has Honor the Fallen. He has a website where he puts the names and the pictures of guys who died on this day that he's posting. And you look at the pictures of those guys, and I don't remember. We were just boys. We were just boys, 19, 20 kids, good-looking American kids right out of high school. That's what they took and they put there. You look at these pictures, there's no Rambo standing there. There's skinny kids, just sitting there with guns, and they're all dying. They're all dead. They're all dead. A guy, Congressional Medals of Honor. You look at the picture of this guy. He looks like nothing. He doesn't look like a Rambo. He doesn't look like, the guy, some big Hollywood hero. He's just an average-looking yo-yo like me or like you. Terrible, terrible, man. It just breaks my heart. Every day I see those pictures, it breaks my heart.
And it is. It's just, when you look back, it is true. Just kids.
Those kids didn't join up. They didn't join. They weren't like the Marines. They weren't like the Navy. They had to be drafted. All these guys were drafted. I mean, I was 23. He was 19, 20, 21. And when I'm thinking back, I don't think of them as kids. I think of them, as brothers. We were in combat gear. We were fighting. We were skilled combatants. But my goodness, we were just boys. We were just out of high school. I mean, you take most of us 7 years before, right? We were just feeling up our first girlfriend. I mean, and here we are fighting a war and banging everything that moved. I mean, it didn't make any sense. I mean, you wake up in the morning and you have actually bugs eating you. You come up, your hand is filled with ants. I mean, there's no way to get out, there's no way to get past it. There's no way to forget it. My buddies all passed away by now. My buddies were all messed up. I don't know how many times I had to run to Georgia to help one of my buddies out of the brig for being disorderly conduct.
Right.
He couldn't get it together. He just couldn't get it together. And I don't blame him.
That's it. Well, Jerry, yeah. I'll tell you, the book, ladies and gentlemen, Vietnam Uncensored, 365 Days in a Nightmare. Why don't you, as we're anticipating the release, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody how they can get to you?
Well, you can find the book at the website. The first chapter is available for free on the website, vietnamjerry.com. If you sign up for the first chapter, you'll get the weekly newsletter, which is what is it? It's it's extra information. It's stories that have nothing to do with my posting. I post on LinkedIn, and I post on Twitter, X, and I post on Medium and Facebook. You can find that You have that, George. You put that on the.
Right on the screen, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pointing to it now. I don't know if you could see it, but I have it up.
Any of those places you could follow, and I post every day. I'll post a little blurb about Vietnam, which is not from the book, but just thoughts from the book. It's not from the book, but thoughts from the book. And you could read that, and I post sometimes larger stories, but exclusive content comes on the weekly newsletter. There you'll find a little bit more, but a story that I wrote, but I didn't put it in the book, so it's outside of the book. You'll find. I think that you'll find the story worthwhile. You'll find it different. It's both funny and tragic, because not everything. The people, we were just people. There were good times and there were bad times, and I try to put the times we laughed and the times we didn't laugh and the times that were tragic. I try to put all that in there. Even when we were injured, they were making. Even in the midst of battle, they were making jokes. These guys.
That's it.
Just the nature of being an American. I think. I think I even mentioned it in the book. I said, here we are in the middle of a battle where we have an existential threat against us, right? And he's making a joke. Some morons.
I tell you, I think.
You must have come across, that.
Oh, sure. And I do it a lot myself now. And a lot of people, like in my family, don't understand where that, I guess, dark sense of humor comes from, where
Right.
And it's a methodology to get through some kind of problem. It's just one technique.
And I can tell you, you have a lot of people, a lot of the newer generation who didn't go to Vietnam know about the terrible treatment of the Vietnam veterans that came back from service that were spit on and belittled at airports by college protesters who blamed the soldier for the war and not the government. We were just tools of the government. We followed orders. We had no other choice. So you baby killers, and that's all bullshit. Right, but the key is that I can tell you, for all that happened, and all these newer generation, I can tell you, 73% of Vietnam veterans that were polled would do it again if they were asked.
Right.
In other words, it was terrible. It was miserable. We died by the thousands, right? And still, these guys were injured, lived under the worst conditions possible. We go back and do it again, and we stand for our country. We are proud of our country. We stand as proud Americans. It doesn't matter what the Army did. It has nothing to do with America. It has to do with the Army. America is still, we fought for America. We deserve the right to stand up for it. Now, if I walk past the flag, I put my hand over my heart. To this day, I do it. I don't stand and salute, but I put my hand over my heart every time I pass an American flag. That's how I feel about my country. And my buddies felt the same way. Even with all the problems we had, all the bullshit that went down, there's not one of them that would have ever said a bad word about our country. President, for sure. Politicians,
right?
For sure. The Army, without question. But not America. America still stands. Stands through.
Amen.
Let me tell you, bro. Let me tell you. Yeah. God bless America. And that's how we felt. And all my buddies felt the same way. All gone now. Everyone gone.
Well, we're glad. We're certainly glad, Jerry, you're still with us. And ladies and gentlemen in the audience, please go follow Jerry on X. His screen name's right on the screen for you, at Jerry_Glazer. And by all means, please go visit his site. The QR code's up on the screen. It'll take you right to it, VietnamJerry.com. Sign up, get his info, look at his posts, because I know we're all looking forward to this work. Again, it's Vietnam Uncensored, 365 Days in a Nightmare by Jerry Glazer. And Jerry, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on and give us an interview and let us know what's going on.
Okay, let me know when you're going to post it, so I'll post it to my followers.
Oh, absolutely. I'll take.
When you're going to put it, when you put this up, just send me a little note that I'm putting this up on Wednesday or Thursday or whatever.
Oh, we'll do it. I'll make sure I share away to you, and
okay.
I'm looking forward to the book for sure. And everybody, please, again, go follow Jerry on X, as well as go sign up at VietnamJerry.com and get ready and anticipate this great release of Vietnam Uncensored. Jerry,
just one more thing before I go.
Oh, sure, please.
God bless you, George, and God bless America.
I'm with you, Jerry.
Take care.
Appreciate you being on, sir.
Okay, bro. Take care. Bye-bye.